I'm going to show you the game between Erik Hansen and Viswanathan Anand. This was the top ball encounter from the Canada-India match from round 3 of the Chess Olympiad. Now, I've already mentioned that I think the two favourite teams for the gold medal are the USA and Russia. But if you're looking for another team that have a pretty decent chance, then you might put your money on India. So they have Anand on board 1. They have Hari Krishna, Vidit, Sashikiran and Adiban on the reserve board. Now that is a pretty good lineup. This is the first time that Anand has played with the Indian team for several years, and that has given their team a real boost. Well, let's have a look at what happened in the game between Hansen and Anand. Anand with the black pieces. Now, would he play some kind of risky sideline, or how is he going to take on the Spanish? Well, he does play a slightly offbeat line, G6 against the Spanish. I mean, actually, this is a very respectable system. Nowadays, I think the two greatest exponents of this variation in top level are Mamedyarov and Grishuk, two pretty decent players. C3. It certainly leads to pretty double-edged positions at quite an early stage in the game. And now, instead of playing with d6 and bishop d7, Anand allows d4 to come and actually gives up the centre straight away. It's a very interesting way to play. Now, take on d4, and here Anand just played d6. Mamedyarov and Grishuk like to play with knight e7 at this point, but Anand played d6, also a very interesting move. Might be preparing bishop g4 to put pressure here. Could have something else in mind. Hansen played h3 here. Frankly, I think that's a bit of a nervous move, and I think instead of that, he should just be castling, or maybe just trying to attack that pawn on b5 straight away with a4. But h3 looks like a nervous reaction to me. I think, you know, if you have to play this move at such an early stage, it doesn't feel right to me. Now, Grishuk has had this position before, and again, he has gone for this knight e7 move. But Anand played knight f6. And, well, curiously, this is quite an unusual move. So we should say that e5 isn't really possible because of the queen trade. So white castled. Now, of course, a very old Spanish trick. If knight takes pawn, then bishop d5 wins a piece here. So castles from Anand. So you can see he's given up the centre, but he has managed to station his bishop to the long diagonal, and there's going to be pressure on these pawns. Now, should white advance these pawns? Well, this one isn't too good. Somehow it's the move we would like to play, but the tactics don't quite work out. Black has reasonable play in this position. In this case, bishop d5 fails to rook d8, and there's a pin on the d file. Or in this position, d5, well, it's a pity to block out this bishop. And here, there's going to be play against the e-pawn. For example, bishop b7, followed by c6. And this knight can always hop back into play via c4. There's a lot of pressure on that e-pawn. So Hansen played rook e1. And bishop b7. So both bishops cutting through the middle of the board. And here Hansen played knight d2. And it's a pity to block in the bishop. The problem is if you play knight c3, then after this and rook e8, there's already pressure on the centre, but I mean, it's hard to say. I just think after this move h3, then black's play comes very quickly against these centre pawns. But knight d2 allowed a strong idea. Knight b4, of course, wanting to come in here. So the knight came to f1. Now Anand hit out with c5, which isn't bad, but I think he missed a good move here. First of all, we should say that this pawn is immune. If knight takes e4, then a3. When the knight goes back, then we can take this. Or if bishop takes, then we can take here. And once again, there is a tactical problem. The knight goes back, and bishop d5, this old tactic. Now, this is important. Instead of that, we play a5. So black's idea is to hunt down the light squared bishop. Now, the obvious response to that is pawn to a3. But here's the trick. Now we play a4, and we're going to get that light squared bishop. And now there is going to be enormous pressure against this e-pawn. Once that light squared bishop goes, then this turns into a monster. And alternatively, after a5, if white blocks with a4, now this is a very different situation, because here we can take, because that knight here cannot be driven away by the a-pawn. So I think a5, I mean, it doesn't guarantee the advantage, but I think it puts white in a very difficult situation. No doubt Anand saw something that he wasn't comfortable with, but it looks pretty dangerous. Instead he played c5. The knight was attacked and dropped back. And here, if white were to exchange on c5, then you can see that, well, this is a very nice queenside majority already. But Hansen closed with d5, good move. And the knight came in, and this was exchanged off. And now, seems to me that bishop f4 is a decent idea. I don't think, well, we'll see what happened in the game, but I think white should leave that pawn there for the time being. But in the game, queen takes d4, and in principle this looks wrong to me, because after this, well, black gets the pawn back for a start and attacks the queen goes back, and now knight b6, good move. We'll see that that knight can be very useful later on, blocking out the bishop. But you can see that both these bishops fly across the board, and it just feels as though Anand's position is gaining momentum now. Now Hansen here was a bit too careful. He moved the rook to d1. I think he's still okay if he gives up a pawn. Bishop f4, so looking here. And if bishop takes pawn, then just bring the rook into the middle. And actually, white has pretty good piece activity here. You know, something like knight h2. And, well, that bishop is pretty good. That knight might kind of flop into the king side. You know, it looks at those important squares. This is still a very open contest. But rook d1, after this, things started to turn in black's favour. Rook c8. Now, it is possible to take that pawn, but black would have some compensation here after this. Grabbing the bishops, and f3, and, well, again, it's all to do with the bishops, but basically, black has compensation here. Can bring this one round. Knight g3 played instead. Knight c4. And you can see it's becoming increasingly difficult for white to relieve the pressure on the b2 pawn. Now that bishop really can't come out because knight takes would be fatal. And if bishop takes knight, then that pawn does a really useful job, again, of just targeting that pawn. Really, that b pawn is going nowhere, and if it's ever taken, then we've got a very strong past c pawn. So after bishop c6, again, fantastic compensation for black here with those bishops, that bishop coming to a4. And that knight looks way out of play on g3. Crucial squares controlled by the pawn on g6. So after knight c4, rook b1 played, and now great move from Anand. Here he really turns on the heat, h5, wanting to push that knight away, and then the e-pawn starts to be really vulnerable, and it's very hard for white to counter this. f3 played, but that weakens white's king side. Yes, supports this pawn, but opens the diagonal here. Check. And now d5, and it's quite clear that the game has totally turned in Anand's favour. He's really taking the game by the scruff of the neck with d5. That was taken, and then rook d8. You can see this is a dream position. Every single one of black's pieces is contributing to the struggle here. It's very hard to offer decent advice for white here. It's basically a miserable situation. But things got even worse after bishop f4. Now I think Hansen was hoping that Anand would take here. After this, the game turns completely. Nice exchange sacrifice actually. After d6, threat is queen g6. Of course, there's a pin there. And that pawn on d6 shuts off black's queen from the king side. And incredibly, white has just a blistering attack here. If the king steps up, then this is unbelievably strong. The queen moves in because this queen is completely offside. White's attack is absolutely blistering here. And queen g5 as well. Let's go back. But Anand, well, he has a real sense for any danger in a position, and he just stopped that straight away with queen f6. It's an incredibly powerful move because the bishop is attacked, and there isn't much better than simply retreating back to c1. And now rook d5, the pawn is recovered, and that queen gets hit again. And rook e8, very strong. So the threat is to push the pawn again, driving away the knight, and then the rook will come down to the second rank. And basically here, white is utterly lost. There really is no hope anymore. This is a very nice closing maneuver from Anand. Of course, rook e2 is possible, but bishop e4 is a great idea. Exploiting the pin, attacking the rook. The rook goes in the corner, bishop d3. Just locking itself on this wonderful square. Knight e3 played. Queen b6, and now this pin is absolutely deadly. Rook e1 protects the knight. And now a very simple winning move from Anand. After this, rook stepping back to e6, Hansen resigned. Well, it's not before time actually. It's not premature. Basically, there is simply no way out of these pins. And bishop d4 is threatened. Bishop h6 also looks like it's going to kill as well. And there's simply no way out for white. Beautiful game from Anand. Looks like he's on great form, and indeed the Indian team won very convincingly. They defeated Canada 3.5-1. So they've won their first 3 matches. That sets up a fantastic clash in round 4. Before I mention the choice pairing of round 4, there are still 18 teams with 3 match wins. So 18 teams sharing the lead after 3 rounds. But the big pairing of round 4 is USA against India. So top teams meeting already in round 4. Watch out for that. If you've enjoyed this coverage, then don't forget you can subscribe to the PowerPlayChess YouTube channel. Just click on the subscribe button and click on the bell if you want instant notifications when new videos are uploaded. And of course, if you want to support our work, then do check out patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, or if you just want to make a one-off PayPal donation, then click on the button. See the links above, and of course check out the Olympiad playlist. You'll see that up there as well. Thanks for watching.